All right, hi everybody. I'm Robert, as you know, and today I'll be telling you why paying college athletes is universally beneficial for everybody. Now first, before I begin, let me preface this by saying, whether you're an athlete or not, we're all college students. And with that being said, we have to balance a lot of things in our lives. Academics, our social life, personal life, all that stuff. And none of that can really happen without money. So, with that being said, let that sink in as I take you through the 3 steps that I hope to get across to you in my proposition. Number 1, being that by paying college athletes, this will allow them to support themselves. Number 2, paying college athletes will end the dispute between the television networks and the players themselves. And number 3, paying college athletes will incentivize them to stay in school longer. So sit back, relax, and listen to my proposition of paying college athletes being universally beneficial for all parties involved. So, as I touched on before, paying college athletes will allow them to support themselves. What is the #1 financial hindrance that we have as college students? That would be tuition, right? Tuition is always going to be there. It's expensive, it's a big part of our lives. By paying college athletes, this will allow them to shovel off some of that load so they can focus their mind both on the field and in the classroom. Paying college athletes will also allow them to take care of their living expenses. Whether you live on campus or off campus, you've got rent, you've got bills, you've got living amenities to take care of, which can be hindersome, obviously. So that again would be something else that they would have the opportunity to take care of with their contribution to the school. And number 3, which I believe is probably the most important, paying college athletes will allow them to support their families. We come from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, some of us higher than others, some of us in the middle, some of us on the lower end. And whether you have a full, partial, or no scholarship at all, I think it would be optimal for college athletes to be able to support their families, the people who got them there in the first place. Number 2, paying college athletes will end the conflict going on between the television networks and the players themselves. As we all know, the television networks and the universities themselves profit off of college football, college basketball, men and women that are broadcasted on TV. In fact, according to ESPN.com, Turner Sports signed a 13-year deal with the NCAA worth $11 billion. That's a lot of money, right? And the coaches, obviously. As we all know, the coaches are all paid. They're all funded by the school. According to the Huffington Post, Coach Nick Saban of the Alabama Crimson Tide takes home about $5.5 million a year. Now, you can have the greatest coach in the world, but a coach is nothing without his great players. There's also merchandise, jerseys, shirts, hats, whatever. When the clientele go to the team store during the game, whose shirts are they buying? They're not buying the coach's shirt. And I'm pretty sure, unless you're the Seattle Seahawks, the fans don't have a jersey. So, unless my name isn't on the back, I'm not going to want those profits. But if it is, I most certainly am. And number 3, paying college athletes will incentivize them to stay in school. Now, I'm sure you're all thinking, staying in school is a good thing, right? Well, you are right. Let me tell you why you're right. It will first allow them to grow, both as athletes and as professionals. Athletes enter the professional level at very young ages. In fact, in the NBA, the minimum age requirement is 19 years old. By paying college athletes, this will incentivize them to stay in school and thus progress as both an athlete and as a person. This will also increase graduation rates, much to the contentment of both the school and the players. Obviously, if you stay in a school long enough, you're going to graduate one day, so that takes care of that. And also, paying college athletes, thus making them want to stay in school longer, will also generate more money for the school. Say you have a good group of players. Paying them will obviously make them want to stay, and the school will generate more money. Now, the main opposition to this argument is, what about the integrity of the college game? What about maintaining the purity of the sport? And to that I say, if Nick Saban is bringing home $5.5 million a year off of the work of his players, imagine what they should be getting. There you go.
All right, Robert, you start with the proposition and then you kind of give us a little bit of context. I think you might want to go the other direction, lead us into the argument a little bit more. That's just a nicety that I think would make the speech easier for people to kind of get into. But you do state your proposition pretty clearly, and there's a good preview of what the supporting points are going to be. I do think there are some presuppositions that are built in here that are a little bit problematic. For example, the first point talks about being able to support themselves, and there's not any demonstration that any athlete is unable to support themselves while they're going to school. The closest you get to that is kind of a reference, well, all students have problems with these sorts of things. But you mentioned it at one point without ever giving us any details on this, that there are such things as athletic scholarships. Sometimes they're full scholarships, sometimes they're partial scholarships. And you did mention that some athletes don't have scholarships. Well, those who do have scholarships, aren't they already getting paid? Aren't they already compensated in some way? Is it you're making an argument that suggests that they get nothing when in fact they do get something in return for the activity that they engage in. What I think your argument ultimately is going to be is that that's insufficient for what they are getting. That's, I think, the implication that you're making there. You don't have any evidence that suggests that that's the case. We don't have any information about the number of students who don't have scholarships. I don't know that how many people are playing on a college level football team, basketball team that don't have scholarships. I'm sure there are some, but I don't know how many or how much money they are lacking or what problems they have because they don't have those particular kinds of things. You don't have any examples on the third point either when you're talking about students potentially leaving school. I assume that the reason that they would leave school early is because there's a more lucrative job someplace else. I'm not sure that you would find that that would change dramatically unless the schools were paying what the NBA is paying or what the NFL is paying. And generally, I don't know that that's what would be in your proposal. You're not really supposed to be making a policy argument, and you phrase it in a way so that it's not a policy argument. But I think because you are suggesting that this policy would produce a particular effect, you'd have to explain a little bit about how that policy would be able to do that. And there's not much explanation of how that policy would work here. On the second point, you talk about ending the dispute between the media and the schools or the students over revenues. I don't know that there is a dispute over those kinds of things. Now, you mentioned, for instance, sales of jerseys and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure that alumni buy the jerseys just because of the athlete that they support. They certainly do for some of them. I think that that's definitely the case. You mentioned, for instance, the name of the athlete being on the back of the jersey. Being from USC, I have no idea what that means because we are a school that doesn't put the names of any of our players on the back of the jerseys. We're the only school that does that, so I guess the rest of the world has got it screwed and we're okay. But the idea here is that there's almost a value argument contained in here that says it's wrong for Nick Saban to make $5 million and for his players not to be paid. But if you look at the scholarship that the players are getting, for instance, if they are there on a full scholarship, which includes room and board, that might be at the University of Alabama, $40,000 to $50,000 a year. That seems like a pretty good chunk of change for somebody who may not be able to play at a professional level, but is still able to get a college education and Gesundheit and some assistance there. What you have to do is show us that there's something that's going on here that is problematic. And I don't know that you do that. You kind of assert that that's a case without proving it. And so we're having some of the same problems that we had in a couple of other speeches, that there's a lack of evidence in the argument. I think you do a nice job speaking to the audience. It's organized. I could tell what your claims were. I appreciated all that. That's something that enhances your credibility, but the data and the support needs to be developed a lot more. All right, thank you.